Hey guys, so this year I decided to partake in the read 100 books in a year challenge, or whatever it is. And instead of reading 100 books, I decided to read only 50 books, because especially during the school year, my reading really slows down because of so much work I have. So right now I'm on number 25, and I thought I would go through all the books that I've read so far and give like a short review. Some might be like a couple words, and some might be me more gushing on the book of how much I loved it. All the book titles and authors will be down in doobly-doo in case I mess it up or something while I'm saying it. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so the first book I read this year, I was actually, when the year started, I was like around halfway through it, so I'm actually going to read 50 and a half books this year. But yeah, so the first book is An Abundance of Katherines by John Green, and I loved it. I have read all John Green's books now, and I have loved every one. This is so good, so real. The characters are believable, and you just totally become wrapped up in it, and amazing. Okay, second book, also John Green, and it's Paper Towns. And I think if I were to pick a favorite, it would be Paper Towns, but I'm not sure. I want to read them all again because they're just so amazing. And again, such an amazing plot line, just writing, everything. So good. And the third book is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, and it's the first in the series of 3. And when I heard about this book, I was thinking, I don't know, I read the back and I was like, it didn't seem to interest me. But it was really popular. One day I sat down in chapters and started reading it, and I fell in love. You get so wrapped up, there's so much happening, and it's so amazing. And if you're gonna start reading the series, make sure you have all 3, because you're gonna get really wrapped into it and you're gonna want the others. And I only had the first one. I had to borrow the other 2 from the library. So good. Okay, my next book is Archie Marries. It's a comic book. Yes, I know, but it's long. It's thick. Look how thick it is. So I included it, and it kind of shows Archie. Well, I'm not gonna spoil it, but if you're an Archie fan, definitely buy this, because also in the back it has interviews of the writers, the drawers, all the creators of Archie, and I think I enjoyed that the most. Okay, next is I read Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. I don't have the book because I borrowed it from the library, and exactly, so it's so intense and so good, and you get so wrapped up to it. Okay, next book was Little Women by Louisa Alcott, and I've read like part of it before when I was younger because my mom told me to read it, and I didn't like it then, and I just stopped. But I didn't really like it the second time. I had to read it for class, and I didn't really like it. It was just, they were too prim and proper, and yeah, it was an okay book. Like, I can see other people liking him. Other people liked it in my class, and my mom really likes it. It's just not for me. I did grow attached to like some of the characters and the storylines. It's a very sweet story. I just probably won't read it again. The next is Treasure Island by Stevenson, and I didn't like it either. I had to read it for class too, for my children's lit class, and I just thought it was really slow, and the action didn't really pick up faster, and yeah, I didn't really like it. The Muppets version though, the movie, is great. Next one is Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins, the last in the series of The Hunger Games, and it was equally as good. The ending, I don't know, I'm still like, I know I've heard other people say they didn't really like it. It was just it wasn't what they expected, but I don't know how she ended it. I agreed how she ended things, but still, the series is amazing and you guys should read it. Okay, second is for my English class, I needed to read was Thoughts and Sentiments of the Evils of Slavery by Cugoano. It's non-fiction, so you really have to, it's hard to pay attention. Like, your mind wanders, and it just wasn't the right time. I needed a fictional story to read, and I had to read it for class. And when he talks about like his life and he kind of goes in story form, then it's easy to follow. But when he kind of just goes on, it's really hard to follow. It's a good book. Really have to be in the right mood to read it. Next was Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Taylor, and I loved it. It was also for my children's lit class, and yeah, it is a children's book, but it's so good. It's told by the point of view of a young girl. She's like around 9 or something, Cassie, and she kind of learns what's happening it's about during like after the Civil War, I think, and just she was always like away from racism, and she didn't really like, she knew it was there, but she was never really that exposed to it, and it's kind of her learning about it, and you see it through her eyes, and it's a really great book. It also has, it's also in a series, and I've only read this one so far, but yeah, I'm sure the others are really good. The next I read was The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. I love Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde, his writing is so beautiful, and he's so funny, and this book, you laugh out loud, and it's so good. And it's a play, but it's so amazing. And the next book I read was The Conversations. Michael Ondaatje interviews Walter Murch, and it's in an interview format, but it's more they both equally talk. And if you're a film buff, or you love editing because you're on YouTube and you edit videos, this is such an amazing book. I loved it. It's nonfiction, obviously, and I just got so wrapped up, and it kind of talks about a lot of the films Murch worked on, and kind of writing, as in like, you know, writing fictional stories compared to editing films, and it's so good. I really enjoyed it. So if you're a film buff, or if you're into editing, I would recommend it. I know if you're not really into it, I don't think you would enjoy it, because I know my friends for others didn't really enjoy it, but I absolutely love this book. It's so good. Next was Break Time by Aiden Chambers. It was for my children's lit class also, but it's more for, I think, teenagers. I did not like it. It's from a point of view of a teenage boy and him wanting to have sex for the first time, and you kind of watch him go through that. And it's really neat how it's written, though. It's written from him kind of writing a story to his friend, because he had this bet, and there's pictures at random times, and there's lists, and there's an excerpt at one point from a book, and it's interesting that way. Sometimes it's hard to follow. Like, I found it kind of jumped, and maybe because I found it hard to follow because I wasn't exactly interested in it. But yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I didn't really like it. Next was The House on Mango Street by Cisneros. Can never pronounce her name. Anyways, this was interesting too, because the way it was written from a point of view of a young girl and the street that she's on, and it has tiny like little stories. So the first one is The House on Mango Street. No, the first one is called A House of My Own. It's like a page long, and she kind of describes the house she lives in, and then it goes on, and it's little, like, you know, pictures of her life, and she kind of stops, and you kind of don't know always what exactly happens, because she doesn't want to go into detail, or yeah, it's really neat how it's written, and I liked it. The next was Goodnight Mr. Tom by Magorian. It was also for my children's lit class. I really enjoyed it. It's such a heartwarming story. It takes during World War II, and it's about when it takes place in London, or not in London, but when people in London send their kids to live off with other families in the farms, and it follows this one little boy, and it's so heartwarming, so good, really great book. Next was The Color Purple by Alice Walker, and I loved it. When I first read it, it's in the form of letters, so she writes letters to God in the beginning mostly, and then she writes letters to her sister, and then God, and it kind of takes, and at first I was like, oh, I mean, it's not very story-like, but it is. It's a beautiful story, and it's so good, and you get pulled in, and it's a really great book. Next book I read was Let Us Know by John Green, Maureen Johnson, and Lauren Miracle. It's 3 stories, each written by each author, and it kind of intertwines, and they're both really good. And I read it, I think, way after Christmas, but I really love the stories, and they're just amazing. The next I read was Will Grayson, also by John Green and David Levithan. And at first, I really wanted to read it, and at first when I was reading it, I was like, oh, this is okay. I mean, I like it, but it's not as good as John Green's other books. I had never read a David Levithan book yet at that point. But then I just totally got wrapped in it, and I totally love it. It's amazing. It's such a good book. And yeah, it should definitely be turned into a musical, because in the part there's a musical. Should actually be a thing. John Green, David Levitt there, and you should totally make it a musical. Yes. Amazing book. You guys totally should read it. Next book was Palestine by Joe Sacco, and it's a non-fiction comic book. I never heard that could be a thing. Joe Sacco's a journalist, and he goes to Palestine and kind of interviews a lot of people, and from both sides he interviews people, and it's really great. Like it's pictures and story, and it's exactly like a comic book, but it's all true. But he adds his own points of view, and he kind of lets you judge what do you think should happen, how things should be changed, kind of thing. When usually journalists have to not include themselves in the story and just kind of tell the people's story. But he includes himself, and he includes his bias, because he's making a statement like, journalists, even though you're not supposed to include your bias, it always works in there. It's always subjective. Your work's always subjective. You can never be totally objective. And it's really neat, and it's a great story, and it's a lot of information, because if you're not familiar, and I wasn't really familiar with the situation in Palestine and everything going on, but he includes it all, and it's really great and interesting, and it's a cool format. The next book I read was Shootout by Peter Bart and Peter Gruber. It's about the film business, and kind of like how everything goes, and it goes through the steps of, like, you know, actors getting movie agents, and how you make a movie, money, and scripts. You get a script and trying to make it into a film and stuff like that. When they go into like more like a storyline, because it's non-fiction, then it's interesting. But when they just kind of went off, I found it was really not, like, it didn't grab my attention, and I near the end I like scanned through it because I just wanted to finish it. So it wasn't really good. Next I read was Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist by David Levitt and Rachel Cohen. It was okay. I liked it, and I liked the references to music and to movies and the small references. It's totally different from the movie. I watched a movie a couple years ago, and the movie's okay too. It's a good book. I just didn't totally love it. The next I read was The Catcher in the Rye by Salinger, and at first I was like, no, this is boring, and I didn't like it, and I did not feel any sympathy for Caulfield, and I don't know, I guess it wasn't totally near the end. I guess later in the book I just totally fell in love with the book. It's a beautiful book. It's so great, and if you've started reading it, definitely stick to it. It's an amazing book. And the Vlog Brothers, John Green makes a couple videos, he talks about it, and he talks about it way better than I could ever can. So I'll link those in the doobly-doo. And the next what I read was Marcello in the Real World by Francis X. Stark. And it's an amazing book. It's about a teenage boy with autism, and he's kind of experiencing the real world for like the first time. And it's amazing. It's amazing how they captured it, because before I read that book, I watched the movie Temple Grandin with Claire Danes, and it's a true story about Temple Grandin, and she has autism, and she's made great leeway and like kind of bringing it to the forefront, and how you can help people with autism, and it's really captured it beautifully, and it's an amazing book. I really enjoyed it. Next book I read was Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. I never read any Mark Twain, except for class I had to read a satirical essay that Mark Twain wrote, and it was so funny. It was hilarious, so I'm like, I need to read some Mark Twain. So I bought this, and I loved it. It's really funny. Twain is just a clever, funny writer, and yeah, it was really good. And lastly, my 25th book, and I'm actually like halfway through it yet, but I'm really liking it, is As You Like It by Shakespeare. Now, this is my first Shakespeare that I have tried to read on my own, apart from school. And I think I've tried to read it, I tried to read it last summer, but I'm like, oh no, what am I doing? I don't understand this. And I think I just read like a couple pages. And this time, I've tried to read it a couple times, and I finally stuck to it, and I am understanding it. It is difficult because it is Shakespeare, but I'm loving it, and it's funny and it's clever and beautiful lines. A definite read, even though I'm only halfway through it, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to enjoy the whole thing. Okay, so that's done. Who has the best shirt ever? I do.